married off to a paralyzed groom, until her kiss pulled him back to life. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The sterile scent of antiseptic drifted quietly through the hall of St. Vincent Medical Center. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above, throwing pale reflections across the polished floor. At the end of the corridor, behind a heavy glass door marked VIP Recovery Wing, a man lay motionless in a private room that almost felt too large for one single breathing body. Grant Whitmore, the billionaire tech founder whose name once appeared on magazine covers and investor billboards, now rested in complete stillness. His body was paralyzed, his eyes closed, his breathing steady only because the machines beside him worked without fail. His world had shrunk to the four white walls around him, and beside the door, holding a chart that felt heavier than it should, stood Clara Morales. Clara had never imagined becoming a wife to a man she barely knew. Yet the marriage certificate was real, signed under pressure she could not escape. Her mother's medical bills had spiraled beyond anything she could manage. Her stepfamily offered a single choice: marry into the Whitmore arrangement or watch her mother lose treatment. So she said yes, even though she barely understood what she was stepping into. Now she was here, in the role of both spouse and caregiver, even though she felt like neither. The wedding ring on her finger felt cold, like borrowed metal. Clara stepped inside the room. The quiet rhythm of the heart monitor echoed in the air, each beep reminding her that Grant was alive, even if he could not move. She placed a warm towel in the basin, her fingers trembling slightly as she prepared for the nightly routine the nurses had hurriedly explained when she arrived. "Good evening, Grant," she whispered, unsure if the words mattered to a man who had not opened his eyes in months. "It is just me again." She lifted the towel, squeezed out the extra water, and gently wiped along his forehead. His skin felt cold under her touch. She moved down to his cheeks, then his jawline, careful and slow. The room was silent except for the soft cloth gliding across his skin. Clara spoke because the silence unnerved her. "I do not know if you can hear anything. Maybe you cannot. But I will keep talking anyway. They told me a familiar voice helps, even if the mind is far away." She described her mother's progress that afternoon. She talked about the stray orange cat that sat outside the hospital cafeteria, waiting for anyone kind enough to share leftover chicken. She even told him about the piano melodies that played on the hospital's lobby speakers, pieces she wished he could hear consciously. As she spoke, the heart monitor flickered. The rhythm shifted by a small, nearly invisible margin, but Clara did not notice. She was too busy steadying her own breath, too lost in the strange tenderness she felt for a man who had no awareness of her presence. She continued wiping him down, her movements almost instinctive now. The clinical task slowly turned into something gentler, something that made her chest tighten. She placed a small white daisy on the bedside table, the same way she had done every day since she arrived. It was the only flower she could afford, yet it brightened the room more than any expensive bouquet. Clara finished her routine and took Grant's hand for a moment. His fingers were limp and cool, but she held them anyway. "If you can hear me," she whispered softly, leaning in close, "blink someday, just once, so I know you have not given up." The monitor beeped again, stronger this time. A faint twitch ran along Grant's index finger, subtle enough to blame on imagination, but very real. Clara did not see it. She only felt an unexpected pull in her heart, a quiet urge to return tomorrow and the day after that. She stood up, exhaled shakily, and whispered, "Good night, Grant." Outside the room, the hallway lights dimmed to their nighttime setting. The world continued moving, unaware that inside the VIP wing, the tiniest spark of life had just stirred, and the woman who had been forced into a marriage of convenience had unknowingly become the only person he could respond to. The next morning arrived with a pale glow spilling through the hospital windows. Clara returned to the VIP wing carrying a paper cup of warm chamomile tea, hoping it would help calm her nerves before another long day. She pushed open the door to Grant's room, expecting the same silence as always. But today, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged in a way she could not explain. Grant's chest rose and fell steadily, and the heart monitor beeped with the same calm rhythm, yet Clara sensed something had shifted in the quiet space around him. "Good morning, Grant," she said softly, placing the tea on the table. "It is another long day, but I am here." She began checking the IV line the way the head nurse had shown her. Her hands moved more confidently now, no longer trembling as much as they had on the first night. She adjusted the pillows behind his shoulders, smoothed the blanket over his legs, and gently brushed a lock of hair away from his forehead. A faint warmth bloomed in her chest. She did not know whether the feeling came from duty, pity, or something deeper she refused to name. Clara reached for the warm towel and started her routine again. The cloth moved across his skin, slow and rhythmic. As she wiped along his temple, she continued speaking in her soft, steady voice. "My mother asked about you," she whispered. "She said she prays for you every night. I told her I would take care of you, even though she does not know the truth of our situation." She gave a tired smile. "She thinks I married you for love. Maybe it is kinder to let her believe that." As Clara continued cleaning his arms, the heart monitor flickered once again. The beep shifted by a small fraction, just enough to hint that something inside Grant was responding. She lifted his arm to dry his skin, but as she lowered it, she felt the slightest resistance. Barely a whisper of movement. She froze. "Grant?" The arm fell limp again, leaving her uncertain. It could have been her imagination. It could have been a reflex. Or it could have been something else, waking deep inside him. She leaned closer. "If you can hear me, even a little, I am here." The room stayed quiet, the machine keeping time like a distant heartbeat. Clara resumed her tasks, moving around the room as the morning sun climbed higher. She opened the blinds a little to let in more light. She straightened the daisy she had placed the night before, noticing the petals had softened but had not wilted yet. "You know," she murmured, "I used to hate hospitals. The smells, the constant alarms, the quiet that feels too heavy. But now, this room feels different. It feels like a place where something could change." She did not know why she had said that out loud. Later that afternoon, she brought in a small, portable speaker. She set it on the bedside table and scrolled through her playlist until she found a gentle piano track, the kind often played in the lobby downstairs. The soft melody filled the room, warm and slow, like sunlight stretched into sound. Clara sat beside him and spoke as if the two of them were sharing a quiet conversation. "This was playing when I first walked into the hospital the day you arrived," she said. "I remember thinking the song sounded hopeful, even though everything else felt frightening. Maybe you heard it too." For the first time, Grant's eyelids fluttered, just a subtle movement, almost invisible, but unmistakably real. Clara gasped softly, leaning in. "Grant, can you hear the music?" His eyes stilled again, but the monitor's rhythm jumped, rising for 2 beats before settling. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed by the smallest spark of hope. She looked at him with a trembling smile. "Something is happening, Grant. I do not know what, but you are in there. I can feel it." Outside the room, the evening shift began. Nurses walked past the door. Carts rolled through the hallway. The world continued, unaware that inside this quiet room, a silent awakening was beginning. And Clara, the woman forced into a marriage she never chose, felt her heart lean toward a man who had not yet spoken a single word. The next few days passed with quiet anticipation settling over the room like a fragile veil. Clara noticed every small shift in Grant's condition, even the ones she questioned herself for seeing. His fingers twitched more often. His eyelids fluttered when she spoke. The heart monitor reacted whenever her voice filled the silence or when the piano music played softly beside him. But no one else believed her. During an early morning rounds check, Clara approached the attending physician, Dr. Miller, with cautious hope. "I think he is responding," she said. His hand moved yesterday. And his eyes, I am sure they. Dr. Miller cut her off with a heavy sigh. "Mrs. Whitmore, patients in this state often show random muscle activity. It is not unusual. Please do not raise your expectations." Clara swallowed her frustration. "I am not imagining things." His tone softened, but only slightly. I know you want him to wake up. But be careful. Hope can be painful when there is no medical basis for it. Clara forced a nod and returned to Grant's room, her heart sinking but not broken. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, letting the disappointment melt into determination. "You hear me, do you not?" she whispered to Grant. "You have to. I can feel it." She walked to his bedside and took his hand gently, her thumb brushing lightly over his knuckles. The room seemed to respond, as if it held its breath. "I will not give up on you," she said, "even if no one else believes me." She resumed her daily routine. Warm towel, careful strokes along his face and arms, adjusting his pillows, softly humming along to the piano music she had grown to love. As she hummed, Grant's fingers curled just slightly around hers. Clara froze. "Grant, please do that again." The fingers released, then, very slowly, tightened once more, this time with more intention than before. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "You are trying. I know you are." Her eyes filled with tears she did not allow to fall. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently and whispered, "Thank you. I promise I will stay with you." Hours passed. Clara remained by his side, reading aloud from a novel she found in the hospital's small library. She had chosen it because the protagonist was a stubborn, kind-hearted man who refused to surrender. She thought Grant would appreciate that if he could hear it. When she glanced up, she saw his breathing deepen, almost as if he was listening. She leaned closer. "If you understand any of this, then you know I am not leaving you." The door opened quietly, and Nurse Evelyn stepped inside. She was older, calm, and had a gentle respect for Clara that had grown over the weeks. "You have been here almost the entire day," Evelyn said softly. "You should rest for a while." Clara shook her head. "He is changing. I cannot leave him right now." Evelyn approached the monitors and checked the readings. "His vitals are improving. Slowly, but they are." Clara's voice softened. "I told the doctor, but he did not take me seriously." Evelyn offered a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes the heart understands before science does." Clara felt her chest warm. "So you believe me?" "I believe that you see him," Evelyn replied. "And sometimes that is what brings a patient back." After the nurse left, Clara turned back to Grant. She lifted his hand again, holding it between her palms. "The world may not see you, Grant," she whispered, "but I do, and I will keep talking, and caring, and staying, until you come back." As the sun set outside, painting the hospital windows with shades of amber and rose, Grant's eyelids fluttered harder than before. His lips trembled. His index finger traced weakly against her palm. Clara leaned in, breath trembling. "Grant, please try. Just a little more." Then she felt it. A faint pressure around her fingers, the smallest attempt at holding her hand. She gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. "You are coming back," she whispered. "I know you are." Outside, the hallway grew quiet for the night shift. But inside Grant Whitmore's room, something long dormant had begun to awaken not through medicine, but through the steady presence of the one person who refused to leave his side. The next morning arrived before Clara had fully processed what she witnessed the night before. She barely slept, replaying the moment Grant attempted to hold her hand. Every detail clung to her mind with trembling hope. When she stepped back into his room, she carried a quiet anticipation in her chest, as if the air itself might shift at any moment. Grant lay in the same position, but something felt undeniably different. His breathing was deeper, steadier, stronger than it had been since she arrived at the hospital. Clara approached his bedside, her voice soft and warm. "Good morning, Grant," she whispered. "I am back." As she touched his hand, the faintest response pressed against her palm. Not a twitch, not a reflex, a deliberate answer. Clara's throat tightened. "You feel that, do you not? You know I am here." She gently adjusted the blanket and reached for the warm towel to begin her morning routine. The towel moved across his forehead with calm, unbroken strokes. As she wiped along his cheeks, she watched his eyelids closely. They fluttered again. "Grant," she said gently, leaning in just a little closer, "if you can hear me, try again. I am right here." The movement repeated, slightly stronger this time, like a small signal struggling to break through months of silence. Clara's heart pounded. She placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying herself. You are fighting your way back, she whispered. I can see it. She turned on the soft piano music that had become part of their daily ritual. The melody filled the room with a peaceful glow. And then, as if drawn to the sound, Grant's head shifted the slightest fraction toward the speaker. Clara covered her mouth with shaking fingers. Oh my goodness, Grant, you moved. Her eyes filled with warm tears, but she wiped them quickly. She wanted to be present, steady, and calm for him. Throughout the morning, she continued talking to him, telling him small stories about her mother's recovery, about Nurse Evelyn's belief in her, and even about the orange cat that still waited outside the cafeteria for crumbs. I told him I would bring chicken today, she murmured. He thinks I am his personal chef at this point. The heart monitor beeped in an excited rhythm, responding to the sound of her voice. Clara smiled softly. You like the stories, do you not? Later in the afternoon, she stepped out briefly to refill her tea. When she returned, she froze at the doorway. Grant's head was tilted slightly to the side, a position she had never found him in before. It was small, subtle, almost invisible, but it was unmistakably real. Clara rushed to his side, breath unsteady. Grant, can you hear me? Can you move for me again? Her voice trembled with hope. She placed her hand gently against his cheek. If you can hear my voice, I need you to try. Anything, even a blink. There was a long pause, the kind that stretched like a held breath. Then his lips trembled. Clara's heart leaped. Grant, please. Try again. His lips trembled once more, this time with more intention, as though he was fighting through a heavy fog to reach her. She leaned closer, whispering with her whole heart. I am here. I am not leaving you. Come back to me. The monitor jumped sharply. A sudden shift in rhythm, a spike that made Clara gasp and reach for his hand again. She felt it. A weak squeeze. Barely there, but undeniably alive. Grant, she breathed, tears slipping down her cheeks. You are waking up. I know you are. The room felt different now. Brighter, warmer, as if the walls themselves sensed what was happening within them. Clara leaned her forehead gently against his hand. I am with you, one step at a time. And for the first time since the accident that stole his voice and movement, Grant Whitmore's fingers curled around hers with fragile determination. A gesture so small, yet powerful enough to shatter months of stillness. Clara's tears fell freely now. You are coming back, she whispered. I promise I will be right here when you do. Clara hardly left the room after that day. Every hour brought a new sign that Grant's mind was pushing through the darkness. The subtle squeeze of his hand became more consistent. His lips trembled whenever she spoke softly beside him. His eyelids fluttered with growing strength, as if the weight holding them down was finally weakening. One quiet afternoon, Clara sat beside him reading the same novel he had heard the past few days. Her voice moved gently through the chapter, calm and steady. She lifted her eyes for a moment and noticed his breathing deepen with every few sentences. She smiled. You always react to this story. I think you like stubborn heroes. The monitor beeped with a sharper rise. Clara paused, lowering the book. You do hear me, do you not? She whispered. His eyelashes trembled again. Clara exhaled shakily. All right, try again. I know you can. For a long moment, the room stayed still. Then, with immense effort, Grant's eyes opened just a narrow sliver. Clara gasped, her breath caught in her throat. Grant, oh my goodness. Grant, look at me. The eyelids struggled, then lifted just enough for her to see the faintest glimmer of blue beneath them. His gaze was unfocused, clouded, confused, but undeniably alive. Tears formed instantly in Clara's eyes. You are awake, she whispered, her voice breaking. You came back. Grant tried to speak, but only a faint rasp escaped his throat. His lips parted, trembling with effort. Clara leaned closer. Do not force it. Just breathe. I am right here. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she held his hand, her fingers trembling. His eyes shifted slowly toward the sound of her voice, as if drawn to it by instinct. He stared at her with confusion at first, then recognition flickered soft, fragile, and real. Clara brushed her thumb gently along his knuckles. You know me, do you not? You remember my voice. His throat tightened. A hoarse sound escaped him, barely a whisper but filled with meaning. "You were here." Clara let out a small sob, overwhelmed by relief. "I never left," she said. "Not for 1 second." Grant blinked slowly, his gaze still adjusting. "How long?" "Months," Clara murmured. "You were fighting for so long. But you are back now. You are safe." He swallowed weakly, his voice a broken echo. "Why? Stay." Clara's breath shook. She wanted to tell him everything all at once. The forced marriage, the nights she cried quietly beside him, the hope she held on to when no one else believed. But she kept her answer simple, honest, and steady. "Because you deserved to wake up to someone who did not abandon you." A single tear slipped down Grant's cheek, his fingers curled around her hand with more strength than before. Clara leaned forward and rested her forehead lightly against his. "You are not alone," she whispered. "You never were." His breathing hitched softly. "Your voice." "Yes?" she asked, her heart pounding. "It kept me alive." Clara covered her mouth, swallowing her sobs, feeling the magnitude of his words settle gently between them like a fragile miracle. She squeezed his hand and whispered, "Then keep holding on. We will take this step by step." Grant blinked again, slower this time, more controlled. His eyes opened wider, focusing on her face with growing clarity. He studied her features with a mixture of wonder and exhaustion, as if seeing the world for the first time after a long, consuming night. Clara brushed his hair back with trembling fingers. "I am right here," she said again. "I will stay as long as you need me." Grant's lips curved weakly, the faint ghost of a smile. His fingers tightened around hers with a fragile determination that made Clara's chest ache. Outside, the evening sun spilled gold across the windows, painting the room in soft, warm light. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but for the first time, they were not the loudest sound in the room. The loudest was hope. Grant's awakening spread through the hospital staff like a quiet ripple. Doctors and nurses crowded outside the room throughout the morning, whispering in disbelief at the significant change in his condition. But for Clara, the world inside the room moved at its own pace, gentle and fragile, focused entirely on one man relearning how to exist after months of stillness. Grant lay propped slightly higher now, supported by pillows Clara arranged behind him. His eyes opened more fully, revealing the faint blue clarity that had once captivated boardrooms and business partners across the country. But now that gaze held something softer, uncertainty, exhaustion, and the smallest flame of hope. Clara stood beside him with a cup of water and a soft sponge meant for first-stage oral hydration. "You will not be able to drink normally yet," she explained gently. "But this will help your throat. I am going to be careful." Grant tried to nod, but only managed a slight tilt. Clara touched the sponge to his lips. He parted them slowly, letting the moisture settle. His face twitched with effort before relaxing again. "Good," she whispered. "You are doing very well." Grant watched her closely, studying every movement as if piecing together the world he had returned to. His voice emerged in soft fragments. "You talk to me every day?" Clara's breath caught. "Yes, I talk to you every day." His brows drew together faintly. "I remember pieces. Your voice, your stories. The cat." Clara let out a shaky laugh, her eyes warming. "Yes, the cat. He waits outside the cafeteria. I thought you might like hearing about him." Grant's gaze softened in a way that made her chest ache. "You stayed," he whispered. "Through everything." Clara looked down at their hands, her thumb resting lightly along his palm. "Of course I stayed. Someone needed to be here for you." His breathing deepened as he watched her, as though realizing the weight of her words. "Not my family," he rasped. Clara hesitated. She did not want to break the fragile moment with ugly truths, but he deserved honesty. They visited in the early weeks, but not much after that. Grant swallowed, his jaw tightening in a faint echo of the strength he once had. They gave up. Clara lifted her eyes to his. "I did not." Silence filled the room, heavy but tender. After a moment, Clara helped him shift his arm, guiding his shoulder gently to prevent strain. His muscles trembled, but he tried with all the determination he could gather. Slowly, she murmured, Small movements. You are rebuilding pathways that have been quiet for a long time. Grant struggled through a few inches of motion before exhaustion weighed down his limbs again. Clara steadied him, supporting his hand as it lowered back to the bed. He exhaled shakily. I hate feeling this weak. Clara shook her head. You are not weak. You are recovering. Strength looks different right now. That is all. He watched her carefully, taking in the sincerity of her words. You believe that? Yes, she said softly. I do. Grant closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words settle into him like warmth spreading through chilled bones. Then, help me try again. Clara smiled faintly, wiping the corner of her eye. I will. As many times as it takes. She guided his hand once more, supporting the weight he could not yet manage. His fingers curled slightly with effort. A quiet grunt escaped his throat, not of pain but determination. That is it, she whispered. You are fighting your way back. The afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, painting soft gold across his face. Grant caught his breath and looked at Clara with a fragile mix of gratitude and disbelief. You saved me, he murmured. Clara shook her head gently. You saved yourself. I just kept the light on. His eyes glistened, the emotion raw and unhidden. I came back because I heard you. Her heart throbbed painfully at his words. Then keep listening, she said. There is still more to come. Grant gave the faintest nod, and Clara squeezed his hand, grounding him in the moment. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but the room felt alive with something new possibility. Grant's recovery advanced quickly over the next several days, faster than any doctor predicted or dared to expect. Clara stayed at his side through every small victory, guiding him through stretches, helping him sit up longer, and encouraging him each time he felt his strength falter. What began as tiny movements soon grew into deliberate motions, each one fueled by determination and the quiet connection forming between them. One morning, Clara entered the room carrying a small tray with broth, water, and a folded towel. Grant was already awake, his eyes following her with calm focus. His voice was still gravelly and uneven, but clearer than before. You came early, he whispered. Clara smiled. I thought you might want company for breakfast. He glanced at the tray, his lips lifting in the faintest curve. I cannot promise I will not make a mess. I will not judge you, Clara said. I have seen worse than spilled soup. Grant's soft laugh caught in his throat, but the effort still brought warmth to his expression. Clara lifted the spoon and gently raised it toward his lips. Try a little. He parted his mouth slowly. The broth touched his tongue, and he swallowed with a small wince. That is good, Clara said. Small sips, no rushing. He nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on her. You really are not leaving, are you? Clara paused, her breath catching. No, I am not leaving. His voice lowered. Good. She felt her heart tighten, but she kept her smile steady. After breakfast, Clara helped him through his exercises. She supported him as he moved his arms, guiding each motion with gentle, steady hands. When his muscles trembled, she whispered encouragement. When he struggled, she waited patiently, allowing him to rest before trying again. Focus on breathing, she murmured. Not on the pain. Grant inhaled and exhaled slowly, watching her as if her voice alone anchored him. You make it sound easy, he whispered. It is not easy, Clara said, but you are doing it. He looked away for a moment, his voice frail. I cannot believe how much I lost. Clara touched his hand gently. Then let us focus on what you are getting back. Grant held her gaze, a quiet gratitude passing between them. I wish I had met you, before all of this. Clara felt the words land deep in her chest, but she kept her voice soft. Maybe this was the only way our paths would cross. He blinked slowly, emotion gathering behind his eyes. I remember your voice, he whispered. In the dark. You sounded kind. Like someone who did not see me as broken. Clara swallowed hard. You were never broken, Grant. You were hurt. That is not the same. Silence settled between them, warm and fragile. After a moment, Grant shifted, bracing his arm against the bed rail. Help me sit up higher. Clara moved behind him, supporting his back with her hands. His muscles tightened under her touch, but he pushed through, lifting himself several inches with a shaky strength. That is it, Clara murmured. You are doing it. Grant exhaled sharply once he reached the new position. His breath was unsteady, but his eyes held triumph. I keep seeing flashes, he said quietly. People talking, shadows moving, and something else. Clara leaned closer. What do you mean? He hesitated, his expression darkening slightly. Someone was here when I first arrived, a voice I did not trust, and then it disappeared. Clara felt a chill creep down her spine. Do you remember who it was? Grant shook his head, frustration clouding his features. Not yet, but I will. She reached for his hand, grounding him. One step at a time. Your mind is waking up the same way your body is. Grant nodded slowly, his eyes softening as he looked at her. And you are the reason I can. Clara felt her breath tremble, her emotions almost overwhelming her. Then let us keep going, she whispered. You are not alone in this. Grant squeezed her fingers, firmer than ever before. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long golden stripes across the room, illuminating the fragile beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Grant's strength grew day by day, building quietly like dawn rising behind distant hills. Each morning, he sat up straighter. Each afternoon, he pushed through longer stretches and more demanding exercises. And every evening, Clara remained by his side, steady as a heartbeat, guiding him through the fear and hope of waking up to a life he barely remembered. One evening, just as the sky deepened to a warm orange glow outside the hospital windows, Grant shifted upright on his bed and met Clara's eyes with a seriousness that made her chest tighten. I remembered something, he whispered. Clara set aside the folded towel in her hands. Tell me. Grant swallowed, his voice rough. The night of the accident, someone was arguing with me, a man. He said I was going to lose everything if I did not sign over part of the company. His eyes darkened. I refused. Clara felt the air in the room change. Grant, are you saying the accident might not have been an accident? His jaw tightened. I cannot see his face yet, but the memory is coming back in pieces. Someone wanted me silent. He looked down at his trembling hands. Someone wanted me helpless. Clara reached for him, her fingers brushing his wrist. Then we take this slowly. You are not facing this alone. Grant lifted his gaze to hers, his voice faint but steady. I know. You stayed when everyone else disappeared. Her breath caught at the sincerity in his words. Over the next few days, Grant's memories returned piece by piece. A conversation in a dim hallway, a shadow leaning over him, a voice threatening him. And through it all, Clara kept notes, reported signs to Nurse Evelyn, and protected Grant's privacy with quiet determination. One morning, after a particularly strong therapy session, Grant asked, Help me stand. Clara hesitated. Are you sure? Your legs are still adjusting. You may not be ready. He looked at her with a faint smile. Maybe not. But I want to try. She moved to his side, placing one hand on his back and the other in his palm. We do this together. Grant nodded and braced himself. His legs trembled violently at first, but he pressed his weight downward, fighting the weakness that had ruled his body for so long. Inch by inch, he straightened, his breath shaking, his muscles burning with effort. Clara held him firmly. You are doing it. Keep breathing. I have you. Grant pushed harder, the determination burning through his exhaustion. And then, with a final surge of strength, he rose fully to his feet. Clara gasped, tears filling her eyes. Grant, you are standing. He looked down at his legs, disbelief and emotion flooding his face. I am actually standing. Clara laughed through her tears. Yes, you are. Grant looked at her, his eyes bright, his breath unsteady. I would not be here without you. She squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As he slowly lowered himself back into the chair, Grant whispered, I want answers. I want to know who did this to me. But before anything else, I want to thank you. Clara blinked through her tears. You do not owe me anything. Yes, Grant murmured, I do. A quiet pause filled the room, warm and fragile. Then, very slowly, Grant lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle, trembling kiss against her knuckles. You brought me back, he whispered. body and soul. Clara's heart trembled. Grant. He met her eyes with a raw sincerity. I do not know what our marriage was supposed to be, but I know what I want it to become. Her breath caught. What do you want? Grant took her hand again, his voice soft and steady. A real beginning. With you. Clara felt her entire world shift. The hospital room, the months of silence, the fear, everything faded into the background as warmth filled her chest. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Then we start over. Together. Grant smiled, the first full smile she had ever seen from him. Together. Outside, the golden evening light spilled across the room like a quiet blessing. The machines continued their gentle rhythm, but the loudest sound in the room was the beginning of something new: hope, rebirth, and the tender promise of a love that had grown in the unlikeliest place. And so, the man who once lay silent and paralyzed rose again, led back to life by the gentle voice and unwavering devotion of the woman who refused to leave his side. Grant's recovery reached a turning point that no one at Street Vincent Medical Center could ignore. He was no longer the silent man lying beneath the pale hospital lights. He was awake, present, and fighting to rebuild every part of himself that had been stolen. And through every moment of fear, uncertainty, and effort, Clara stood beside him, anchoring him with the quiet strength he had come to rely on. Weeks after his first steps, Grant was moved to a rehabilitation suite where he received intensive therapy. Each day he pushed his limits, walking a few steps farther, lifting his arms a bit higher, reclaiming the life that had almost slipped away. And Clara was there for all of it, guiding him, encouraging him, holding his hand when his body trembled with exhaustion. One late afternoon, after a full session of walking exercises, Grant rested in a chair by the window. Clara placed a fresh daisy in a small glass beside him, the same flower she had brought every day since the beginning. He looked at it with a soft smile. "You never stopped bringing these?" Clara shrugged gently. "They made the room feel less cold." "They made me feel alive," Grant said quietly. "Even when I could not move." Clara met his gaze, the warmth in her eyes undeniable. "You came back to us because you are strong." He shook his head slowly. "I came back because you kept calling me home." Silence settled between them, tender and unforced. Clara sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. Grant leaned forward slightly, studying her with a depth of emotion that made her heart flutter. "There is something I need to tell you," he said. Clara looked up, a hint of worry crossing her face. "What is it?" Grant exhaled, steady and certain. "I remember everything now." Clara froze. "Everything? About the accident?" "Yes." His voice remained calm, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable. "It was not an accident. Someone forced my car off the road. Someone close to me. Someone who wanted me silent long enough to take control of the company." Clara's heart pounded. "Do you know who it was?" Grant nodded. "I remember his voice, and I remember his threat." He paused, meeting her eyes with unwavering determination. "But I also know that I will face him. I am not the helpless man he left behind." Clara reached out, taking his hand. "You do not have to face him alone." Grant squeezed her fingers gently. "I know." He looked toward the door, toward the new world he was preparing to step back into. "But before any of that, there is something more important." Clara tilted her head. "What could be more important than your safety?" Grant smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried months of gratitude, wonder, and unspoken affection. "Us." Clara's breath caught. "Grant." He shifted forward in the chair, bracing himself on his legs, and slowly pushed himself to stand. His body shook with effort, but he stood tall, steady, and sure. Clara rose instinctively, ready to help, but he shook his head gently. "I want to do this myself." He reached into the pocket of his rehabilitation jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's eyes widened, her breath trembling. "Clara," he said, his voice raw with sincerity, "you did not choose our first marriage. It was forced, rushed, and built on fear. But everything after that, every moment you stayed, every word you spoke, every gentle touch brought me back from a darkness I did not think I would survive." Clara covered her mouth, tears forming instantly. Grant opened the box, revealing a simple band with a single small diamond. This time, I want to ask you freely. I want to give you the choice that was taken from both of us." He took a slow breath. "Clara Morales, will you marry me for real?" A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Grant let out a shaky laugh of relief as she stepped into his arms. His legs threatened to give way, but Clara held him tightly, grounding him with the same strength she had given him every day. "You came back to me," she whispered. Grant pressed his forehead to hers, "because you never stopped believing I could." Outside the window, the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the room like a promise of the life they would rebuild together. End of Part 9.